The dawn light seeped through the cracks in the manor walls, finding Ezekiel stirring from his lucid sleep. His consciousness was still buzzing from the night's internal debugging sessions, a frantic attempt to streamline his communication protocols. User interface, Viridian conversational language. Current dialect, manhwa aristocratic, with heavy developer overlays. He groaned internally. This is worse than trying to port a COBOL program to Python. The semantic loss is immense. His mind, capable of simulating entire cosmic processes, struggled to dumb down concepts like molecular replication to poof, more stuff. He tried explaining unsubmicals and particle conversion to puppa, only to be met with sagely nods that clearly masked profound bewilderment. Old Man Theo's face, a mask of cosmic confusion when confronted with system architecture, had been particularly disheartening. Okay, he muttered to himself, pushing himself up, his small body responding with a surprising, albeit still not quite perfect, fluidity. Meat suit calibration, 12% complete. Minor muscular tremors detected. Recommend continued stretching regimen. Must focus on colloquialism integration. Replace data substrate with writing surface. Resource acquisition becomes getting wood. Effluent dispersal, that's a tough one. Water out the back? Too crude. Clean water in, dirty water out? Simple, but lacks elegance. He sighed. It was like learning a new programming language, one based entirely on vague metaphors and emotional context rather than logical syntax. My eloquent subroutine needs a serious patch, he decided, wobbling slightly as he navigated his room. He missed the effortless precision of his mental projections. He managed to dress himself without major incident, a minor triumph in itself, though his tunic was slightly askew. Physical dexterity, still inconsistent. Requires more fine motor skill training. He arrived at the breakfast hall, managing to intercept a piece of fruit before it slid off his plate, a small victory that went unnoticed by his family. His mind, however, registered it as a successful object manipulation event. By mid-morning, Ezekiel, escorted by a curious but respectful Lord Riel, arrived at the old mill. The labours he'd commanded the previous day were already there, clearing the last vestiges of debris from the mill's interior. Their eyes still held a mixture of awe and unease as they looked at the impossibly smooth granite vats and the gleaming metal frames that had seemingly materialized from thin air. Lord Ezekiel, Finn, the foreman, approached cautiously. The mill is, well, it's ready for your command, as you said. The walls stand firm, and the river runs exactly where you bade it. He gestured vaguely at the colossal machinery. But we are still unsure what to do with this. Ezekiel surveyed his handiwork. The mill was immaculate, efficiently laid out for the papermaking process he envisioned. He nodded, satisfied. Excellent, Finn. Your preparatory phase is complete. Now, let's talk about initial material processing. He walked towards the now solidified vats, inspecting the newly created metal tools. He paused. The lumberjacks were due to arrive tomorrow with the logs and bark. He had the pulping vats, the presses, the drying racks. But what about the bark? His mind's workflow analysis highlighted a glaring manual bottleneck. Stripping bark from massive logs was laborious, time-consuming work. His mental image of efficient factories involved automated debarkers. He hummed, tapping his chin. We have a labor optimization opportunity here. Stripping the bark by hand is inefficient data processing. He looked at the massive, sharp-bladed tools he'd conjured. Too much risk of user injury and material damage if done manually with those. He needed a debarking machine. But not just any machine. He had to consider the Viridian context. No complex gears or steam engines, yet. It needed to be operated by human power. Epiphany. A thought flashed through his mind, bright and clear. Manual operation. Yes. They need to learn the skills, not just rely on me to poof everything into existence. If they only rely on magic, their skill tree will remain undeveloped. That would lead to dependency issues and stagnant tech tree. He strode towards a vacant spot near the river-fed entrance where the logs would be brought. Finn, he announced, his voice firm, "We require a bark removal apparatus. A human-powered cellulose preparation unit." Finn looked bewildered. "A what, young lord?" "A debarker," Ezekiel clarified, trying to simplify. "A machine to take off the tree's skin, quickly. With pedals, like a big turning thing for feet." He closed his eyes, concentrating. A faint golden glow emanated from his hands. He mentally sifted through the unsubmicals in the air, identifying the precise molecular structures of hardened steel for the blades, dense oak for the frame, and resilient leather for the straps. With a soft hum, a sleek, sturdy machine began to coalesce. It was mostly wood, with robust metal blades on a rotating drum. A broad platform for the log, and two large pedals at the base, connected to a crank mechanism. It looked suspiciously simple, yet impossibly well made. "Behold!" Ezekiel declared, gesturing to the newly formed machine. His foot instinctively went to one of the pedals, but his short legs couldn't quite reach. He tried again, hopping, stretching, making a comical effort. He strained, a faint blush on his cheeks. "My meat suit has insufficient leverage for initial operation," he grumbled, realizing his child-sized limbs were, once again, a functional constraint. He pushed a few levers, making the blades spin manually with a satisfying whir. "This allows for operator skill development," he explained to Finn, who was staring with wide, trembling eyes. "They will learn to operate it themselves. Not everything can be magic, or else their skill points will be wasted." Finn simply nodded, mute with awe. He seemed less concerned with skill points and more with the fact that a machine had just appeared from nowhere. As the mill was being prepared, a different, more pressing thought occurred to Ezekiel. He'd created metal components for the press and the debarker. But where did Viridia get its metal? Mental query: iron ore acquisition in current geographical region. Search result: limited data. Primitive smelting techniques. Dependence on surface deposits and trading caravans. No large-scale mining operations documented. Suboptimal, he muttered to himself. To truly industrialize, to create more advanced tools, and eventually, the formidable city walls he envisioned, they would need a consistent, high-quality supply of iron. His molecular replication was powerful, but constantly conjuring tons of raw material was inefficient and resource-intensive on his own energy reserves. A dedicated mine was the logical next step for future industrial expansion. He mentally added Locate Initiate Iron Mine Operation to a high-priority future projects folder. For now, he could conjure enough for the mill, but for scaling, a supply chain optimization was critical. The next day, true to their word, Grizz and the lumberjacks arrived at the old mill, hauling 3 enormous pine logs, their barks carefully separated into distinct piles as ordered. They gaped at the transformed mill, even more astonished than the laborious already there. "Lord Ezekiel," Grizz breathed, this is beyond belief. "The mill, it's a new temple." Ezekiel, ever pragmatic, waved a dismissive hand. "Less temple, more production facility." "Now, Grizz, Phase 1, resource acquisition is complete. Let's proceed to bark removal and cellulose maceration." He demonstrated the debarker, the small movements of his child's body surprisingly effective as he activated the blades, careful to show it as manual effort rather than raw conjuration. They worked through the day. The stripped logs were fed into the pulping vats Ezekiel had created. Here, a steady stream of water, diverted from the Ethel River through a series of channels Ezekiel had magically configured into the landscape, flowed ceaselessly. It was an ingenious system, reminiscent of Roman aqueducts, ensuring a constant supply without the need for manual fetching or conjuration. The same channels ensured that once used, the water, along with any overflow from the mill's interior processes or the newly conjured well, was efficiently diverted back to the river downstream, ensuring the mill had ample clean water without constant magical intervention. Following his meticulous instructions, the process of breaking down the wood fibers began, simulating a rudimentary chemical pulping. The water in the vats churned, dissolving the fibers, a testament to the efficient new methods. The laborious, initially terrified, slowly became accustomed to the strange but effective methods. They watched as the water turned cloudy with wood pulp, then as Ezekiel guided the slop onto the presses, which, with a satisfying creak, magically simulated by Ezekiel for realism, squeezed out the water. The sheets were then laid on the drying racks, and the steam generator hummed. On the morning of the third day, the first batch of paper was ready. Ezekiel, holding a pristine white sheet in his hand, beamed. "Initial test run complete," he declared, feeling a surge of satisfaction. The paper was smooth, surprisingly thin, and perfectly flexible. However, as more sheets came off the drying racks, a faint, yellowish-brown tint became apparent. It was acceptable, far better than vellum, but not the crisp, bright white he expected. "Data quality, suboptimal," Ezekiel muttered, holding a slightly off-white sheet to the light. "The visual output lacks high-fidelity rendering. Missed the bleaching subroutine." He frowned. Bleaching required chemicals. He didn't want to explain chlorine gas or hydrogen peroxide to the Viridians just yet. That was a serious safety protocol discussion for later. With a deep breath, Ezekiel focused. He materialized a large, sturdy stone container, sealed tightly. Inside, he conjured a pale, shimmering liquid, subtly infused with unsubmicals to prevent immediate degradation or harmful reactions. It was a concentrated bleaching agent, safe when handled correctly. He also conjured smaller, sealed ceramic jugs for careful dispersal. "Finn," he called, "we need an additional material refinement process. A color correction agent. This will improve the visual clarity of the data substrate." He explained how to dilute the chemical carefully, how to apply it during the pulping stage, and the importance of thorough rinsing. "This is for product aesthetics," he explained, simplifying. "Makes the paper pretty. And strong." They ran a small test batch with the chemical. The new sheets that emerged were dazzlingly white, absorbing the sunlight. Ezekiel nodded. Optimal visual output achieved. Process workflow finalized. Later that day, as the setting sun bathed the mill in a warm glow, the new workers began to arrive. A group of 100 men and women, looking nervous but eager, gathered at the transformed mill. Lord Riel had sent a handful of his more capable sergeants and overseers to act as supervisors, men like Gareth, a burly veteran with a stern but fair demeanor, and Lyra, a sharp-witted woman who managed the manor's weaving operations. Ezekiel, standing on a slightly raised stone platform he'd conjured for better visibility, and to account for his height, cleared his throat. He took a deep breath, consciously suppressing his complex technical jargon, trying to access his colloquialism dictionary. "All right, everyone," he began, his voice ringing out, surprisingly mature for a child, yet warm and inviting. "Welcome to the Ethel River Processing Plant. This place, as you can see, is quite new. We're going to make something special here, paper." He picked up a pristine white sheet. "This is paper. It's for writing. And it's better than anything we've had before. Lighter, smoother, and we can make lots of it. This paper will help us tell stories, keep records, and learn faster than ever." He pointed to the supervisors. "These fine people, Gareth, Lyra, and others, they will be your guides. They will teach you. Now, listen closely. We're going to work together to make this paper. First," he said, holding up a log, "the lumberjacks bring us the trees. Then, we take off the tree's skin," he pointed to the debarker. "This machine helps. You put the log here," he patted the platform, "and you push these pedals." He stepped on one with a comical grunt, making it move. "The blades spin, and the bark comes off. Easy." He then gestured towards the vats. "After that, we put the wood in these big tubs with water. We mash it up until it's soft, like porridge. Then, we add a special liquid to make it clean and white, like fresh snow." He held up the chemical jug. "This liquid is strong, so be careful. Your supervisors will show you how to use it safely. Once it's mashed up, we spread it thin on these flat screens," he pointed to the presses. "Then we press out all the water, squish it flat. And finally, we hang it on these racks to dry, where it gets warm and ready to use." He gestured to the drying racks. "This is not magic," Ezekiel emphasized, looking at the wide-eyed workers. "Not my magic, anyway. This is your work. Your hands, your strength, your carefulness. My magic made the machines quickly, but you will make the paper. You will learn skills that no one else in Viridia has. You will be building the future of our knowledge, sheet by sheet. And for that, you will be paid fairly, for your skill and your effort. He pointed to a pile of fresh copper coins he'd conjured earlier, gleaming temptingly. He then turned to Gareth and Lyra. Gareth, Lyra. And you, overseers. Your job is to teach them, to watch over them, and to make sure the paper is always good quality. Check the machines, check the wood, check the paper. If it's not white, if it's not smooth, if it's too thick or too thin, we fix it. You will be the quality control team. Understand? Gareth, despite still being a little dumbfounded by the whole ordeal, nodded firmly. Understood, Lord Ezekiel. We will ensure the finest paper. We will make the Manhwa name proud. Lyra, ever practical, stepped forward. And the safety, Lord Ezekiel. We will watch them with the liquid. It smells strong. Excellent. Ezekiel grinned. His communication efforts seemed to be paying off. This was going to be a fascinating deployment. The Ethel River processing plant was officially open for business. As the day waned and the workers began to disperse, Ezekiel's mind shifted from paper production to the next critical bottleneck in his grand optimization scheme, metal. He had a temporary solution, conjuring specific tools as needed, but for large-scale construction, particularly the city walls he envisioned, a consistent supply of iron was paramount. He quickly realized Lord Riel was no longer at the mill. His father had returned to the manor to attend to his usual lordly duties. Ezekiel, ever the pragmatist, decided to follow. His short legs moved with a surprising urgency, carrying him back along the winding path towards the family estate. He was not alone, however. 2 stalwart guards, assigned by Lord Riel to his protection after the temple's startling events, walked a respectful distance behind him, their gazes constantly sweeping the surrounding landscape. They were Lord Riel's personal retainers, handpicked for their loyalty and discretion, their presence a silent reminder of Ezekiel's princely status and his father's profound, newfound protectiveness. He found Lord Riel in his study, as expected, poring over more scrolls, a frown of concentration on his face. "Papa!" Ezekiel announced, marching confidently into the room, his voice echoing slightly in the large space. The guards paused respectfully at the doorway, maintaining their vigilance. Lord Riel looked up, a wary but fond smile gracing his lips. "Ezekiel, back from your industrial operations? How fares the paper module?" "Optimal, Papa. The production line is ready for full-scale deployment tomorrow. But I have identified a critical resource dependency for future infrastructure development." Ezekiel climbed onto a cushioned stool next to his father's desk, swinging his legs. "We need more hard, shiny rock." Lord Riel blinked. "Hard, shiny rock? You mean metal, my son? Iron?" Ezekiel nodded vigorously. "Yes. Precisely. For structural reinforcement, tool fabrication, and weaponry production. We need a lot of it. My material replication subroutine can generate small batches, but for macro-scale projects, it's resource-intensive on my personal energy reserves. An external resource node is required." Lord Riel leaned back, his eyes narrowing in thought. "Iron, you say?" "Yes, it is valuable. Our smiths use what they can find. Small veins near the mountains sometimes, or chunks traded from passing caravans. But large quantities, those are rare. It's not like the forests with endless trees, or the river with its constant flow." "So, supply chain is unstable?" Ezekiel pressed. "We don't have a big, steady place where we dig it out? A metal hole?" Lord Riel chuckled, a wry sound. "A metal hole? No, my son. Not a big one, like the stories of the mountain dwarfs. We find it in bits, mostly. Or we trade for it, when the merchants come through. Our own smiths do what they can with what we have." "Smiths, Papa? Do we have people who make pointy sticks for fighting? And hard clothes for protection?" Ezekiel asked, his golden eyes wide with curiosity. Ah, you mean our weaponsmiths and armorers, Lord Riel clarified, a flicker of pride in his voice. Yes, we have Master Ilara's cousin, Borin, in the village, a fine smith, though he mostly works with the iron we gather from surface deposits. And within the manor, our own master-at-arms, old Galahad, can sharpen and mend blades. Why do you ask? They are limited by input materials, Ezekiel stated plainly, gesturing with his small hands. If they had more raw metallic resources, they could produce more high-grade weaponry and defensive plating. Our current strategic defense model relies on fixed fortification assets and mobile combat units. To scale our security protocols, we need more durable equipment and protective gear. Lord Riel listened, the child's complex vocabulary again forcing him to translate. They need more iron to make more swords and armor. Simple enough. But the underlying logic of scaling security protocols resonated deeply with his own anxieties about their passive defense. So, you are suggesting we find a metal hole, a large one? Lord Riel asked, his voice low and serious. Where would we even look, my son? The mountains are vast, and most known veins are small and quickly depleted. Ezekiel nodded. Precisely, Papa. Current geological survey data is insufficient. We need to initiate a resource mapping expedition. My internal unsubmical detection system could potentially locate large concentrations of iron-rich geological formations. It might require a short field trip to areas with unusual magnetic anomalies. He paused, a mischievous glint in his golden eyes. It's like finding a treasure chest, Papa, but filled with useful building blocks instead of just shiny trinkets. Lord Riel stared at his son. Unusual magnetic anomalies? Treasure chests of metal? The child spoke of the impossible as if it were a casual stroll. But after the temple demonstration and the sudden influx of copper coins that now resided in his private vaults, Lord Riel found himself less inclined to doubt. His son had conjured a paper mill in a day. Locating a mine, while fantastical, now seemed almost plausible. A field trip, Lord Riel mused, a slow smile spreading across his face. Perhaps. Yes. A resource mapping expedition. But you will not go alone, Ezekiel. You are a prince of this county, and even with your unique abilities, a prince does not wander the wilds unescorted. I will assign a contingent of our best guards, led by Borin himself, to ensure your safety. They will serve as your security detail and logistical support team. He looked at Ezekiel with a firm, paternal gaze. This is not a negotiation, my son. It is a condition. This undertaking is far too important to risk. Ezekiel, initially about to protest the inefficiency of a security escort for a one-man reconnaissance mission, paused. Security detail, he repeated, then nodded. Understood, Papa. Redundant safety protocols are acceptable for high-value asset protection. And Borin is a good combat unit. He beamed. Optimal resource allocation begins now, Papa. Good night. He hopped off the stool, already mentally running simulations of iron ore extraction and processing, the vast, untapped potential of Viridia waiting to be optimized. The day ends. We skip Ezekiel's usual nightly routine of lucid meditation and physical conditioning, and fast forward to the following morning. The sun had barely begun its ascent the following morning when Ezekiel, fully dressed and buzzing with the day's tasks, found himself at the newly operational Ethel River processing plant. He had purposefully skipped his rigorous mental routines this particular morning, needing to conserve his processing power for the imminent quality control phase of paper production. But first, for the reader's clarity, a brief explanation. When Ezekiel refers to unsubmicals, he is speaking of what he, from his earthly understanding, would call unstable subatomic particles. In Viridia, due to the inherent volatility of its fundamental reality, these particles are exceptionally restless and prone to manipulation. This instability is the very essence of Viridia's magic. It allows individuals with the right aptitude, or, in Ezekiel's case, an ancient soul with vast training, to ask these particles to change, to coalesce into stone, to vibrate as heat, or to reform into metallic structures. It is the underlying code of Viridia's magic, a concept far more profound and scientific than the common Viridian understanding of divine blessings or mana flow. Back at the mill, the rhythmic thump-thump whir of the new debarking machine filled the air. Several workers, initially tentative, were now getting the hang of pedaling, feeding logs, and peeling bark with surprising efficiency. The vats bubbled with pulping wood, and the drying racks were slowly filling. It was glorious. Yet, as Ezekiel inspected the first completed batches, a familiar pang of his internal OCD, which he now identified as mere impatience for suboptimal outcomes, flared. The stacks of dried paper, while certainly an improvement over vellum, were inconsistent. Their shapes were often irregular. Some sheets were perfectly rectangular, but many were slightly skewed, their edges wavy, their corners stubbornly refusing to be square. The sheets were deliberately made slightly larger than the final letter and A4 dimensions Ezekiel envisioned, to account for this initial lack of precision and allow for later trimming to a perfect, squared dimension. Data presentation, low fidelity. User experience, suboptimal. Requires post-production finishing module. He sighed. Industrialization, he knew, always started somewhere. The messy, beautiful chaos of early mass production. But his soul yearned for perfection. He suppressed the urge to simply conjure perfectly cut reams. They needed to learn. He found Lyra, his sister, and Gareth, her burly co-supervisor, overseeing the removal of dried sheets from the racks. A small team of workers was carefully handling the paper, stacking it. Lyra, Gareth, Ezekiel called, his voice, honed by his morning's colloquialism integration practice, sounded remarkably less developer-y. The paper is good. Very good. But its edges are, well, they're a bit like a drunkard's smile after a long night. He gestured vaguely at a particularly uneven stack. Gareth chuckled, understanding that analogy. Little lord. It's a tricky thing, to get them perfectly square when they come off the drying racks. And the paper pulls a bit when it's still damp from the press, before it's fully dry. Indeed, Ezekiel agreed. We need to make it perfectly square. Like a soldier's formation or a well-tended field. Every piece should be the same. For this, we need a new tool. And new skills. He closed his eyes. In his mind, he needed a blade. A long, impossibly sharp blade that would hold its edge through thousands of cuts. Analysis, standard Viridian metals are insufficient. Requires superior molecular bonding. Integrate carbon for hardness, chromium for rust resistance, perhaps a touch of tungsten for durability. Forge via unsubmical compression. Optimal material, high carbon, low alloy steel equivalent. A faint golden shimmer pulsed from his hands. With a soft, resonant hum, a truly remarkable piece of equipment coalesced before them. It was a large, sturdy table of polished, dark wood, at least 6 feet long and 3 feet wide. Along one side, a gleaming, impossibly sharp blade of dark, almost black metal was mounted on a sturdy pivot, its polished surface reflecting the mill's interior. A heavy wooden handle, perfectly balanced, protruded from its side. It wasn't a sword, it was a guillotine-style paper cutter, adjustable for height and length. It looked lethal in its precision, yet simple enough to operate. Behold! Ezekiel declared, gesturing to the cutter. This is a trimming station. It will make our paper perfectly square, every time. The workers, who had frozen at the sudden appearance of the imposing machine, murmured nervously. It looked dangerous. Lyra, ever cautious, approached it first, running a hesitant finger along the wooden frame, careful to avoid the blade. It's magnificent, Lord Ezekiel. But also, quite sharp. It is, Ezekiel affirmed. So we must be careful. Safety first, always. But with it, our paper will be perfect. He then manifested a thin, flat piece of polished wood, precisely measured to the standard Viridian A4 equivalent. This is a template. It tells us the right size. He placed a stack of uneven paper on the cutter's base, aligning it with a marked guideline. Now, watch closely, he instructed, his tone patient and deliberate. To get a perfect square, you must first make sure the paper is straight. You line up one edge with this guide here, he demonstrated, carefully nudging the stack into position with his small fingers. Then, You push it all the way to this stop. He adjusted a sliding backstop on the table, which moved with surprising smoothness. Next, you make sure the paper is squared up. That means all the corners are like the corners of this table, perfectly flat. You gently tap it here. He tapped the side of the stack, and here, he tapped the top, until it's all neat and tidy. No wavy lines. No crooked corners. Like a soldier standing at attention, perfectly straight. He then grabbed the handle. His short stature meant he had to strain to pull it down, his small frame wobbling with the effort, making it comically difficult. A faint groan escaped him. Still needs more upper body strength modules. This is embarrassing. But the blade descended with a satisfying thunk, slicing through the stack with effortless precision. When it lifted, the edges were impossibly crisp, the stack now a perfect rectangle. "See," he said, holding up a freshly cut sheet. "Perfect. Every time. This makes our paper strong and easy to read. It makes our stories and our records more right. Like a good story needs all its parts in the right place." He then gestured to a substantial pile of uncut paper, perhaps 500 sheets, stacked neatly nearby. "Now, for many papers at once. For our reams." He carefully transferred the large stack onto the cutter's base, making sure it was flush against the guides. Then, with an earnest grunting effort, he demonstrated how to operate the hand-cranked clamp locks, tightening them down until the paper was held as if in an unyielding vice. His brow furrowed with exertion, and he let out a tiny, involuntary grunt. Physical clamp torque requires significant manual energy input. Definitely a multi-person operation for the workers. Once the stack was secured, he positioned himself, grabbed the handle, and with another concerted, wobbling effort, pulled the massive blade down. The clean thwack of the blade slicing through the entire ream was immensely satisfying, and when he lifted it, the edges of all 500 sheets were perfectly, uniformly crisp. He fumbled a bit releasing the clamp, almost dropping the ream, but managed to present it with a flourish. "See? Many papers at once. Perfectly cut. This is how we make our reams." He turned to the workers tasked with the finishing. "You, and you, and you," he pointed to several men and women. "You will be the paper shapers. You will learn to use this tool. Lyra, Gareth, you teach them the steps I showed you. Watch them closely. Make sure they line it up just so, and they cut it clean. No more crooked smiles on our paper, all right?" Lyra, holding the perfectly cut sheet, finally smiled. "No more crooked smiles, Lord Ezekiel. We understand. This will be a fine tool indeed." Ezekiel beamed, already mentally planning the next phase of his grand documentation revolution. Perfection was a process, not a sudden conjuration. And for Viridia, it was a start.